Chapter 1. The Boy Who Survived. In the quaint neighborhood of Privet Drive, Mr. and Mrs. Dursleycottonbottom prided themselves on being utterly ordinary. They disdained anything peculiar or mysterious, preferring a life of strict normalcy. Mr. Dursleycottonbottom, a robust man with a massive mustache and a barely discernible neck, held a prominent position as the director of Grunnings, a drill manufacturing firm. His wife, Mrs. Dursleycottonbottom, a slender and fair-haired woman, possessed an unusually long neck that proved advantageous when she engaged in her favorite pastime of spying on the neighbors over their garden fences. Their pride and joy were their young son, Fugley, whom they deemed the epitome of perfection. While the Dursleycottonbottoms appeared to have everything they desired, they harbored a deep-seated secret they feared might be discovered. Unbeknownst to the outside world, Mrs. Dursleycottonbottom had a sister, Mrs. Potterwotter. However, the Dursleycottonbottoms had deliberately distanced themselves from the Potterwotters, as they considered them profoundly unsuitable company. The mere thought of the Potterwotters' presence in their street filled the Dursleycottonbottoms with dread, and they were adamant about keeping their distance. The Potterwotters had a young son of their own, a fact that provided the Dursleycottonbottoms with yet another reason to avoid any contact. They shuddered at the idea of Fugley associating with someone they perceived as undesirable. On one seemingly ordinary Tuesday morning, the Dursleycottonbottoms woke up to a dreary, overcast sky. Little did they know that this day would mark the beginning of extraordinary events unfolding throughout the country. Oblivious to the impending changes, Mr. Dursleycottonbottom cheerfully selected his most mundane tie for work, while Mrs. Dursleycottonbottom went about her day gossiping and tending to the energetic young Fugley. Little did they suspect that the mysterious and extraordinary would soon intertwine with their seemingly ordinary lives, setting off a chain of events they could never have fathomed. None of them took notice when a large, tawny owl fluttered past the window. The clock struck 8:30, and with a peck on Mrs. Dursleycottonbottom's cheek and a futile attempt to kiss a tantrum throwing Fugley goodbye, Mr. Dursleycottonbottom left the house, chuckling at his son's behavior. He hopped into his car and reversed out of number 4's driveway. However, it was at the corner of the street that Mr. Dursleycottonbottom's ordinary morning took an unexpected turn. A peculiar sight caught his eye, a cat seemingly reading a map. Confused, he blinked and looked again, but the cat appeared normal, chalking it up to a trick of the light. Mr. Dursleycottonbottom shook off the odd occurrence and continued driving. As he approached town, his thoughts shifted to an impending business deal involving a significant order of drills. However, the traffic jam on the outskirts of town diverted his attention once more. A crowd of strangely dressed individuals, some in cloaks, had gathered nearby. Their presence irked Mr. Dursleycottonbottom, who found their attire ridiculous, assuming it to be some bizarre new fashion trend. He scornfully dismissed the gathering as a mere fundraising effort and carried on to the Grunnings parking lot, his mind returning to work matters. Little did he know that these seemingly insignificant encounters were the first faint hints of extraordinary events about to unfold, events that would forever alter the course of his life and the world around him. Mr. Dursleycottonbottom maintained his usual posture in his ninth-floor office, with his back turned away from the window, unaware of the peculiar events transpiring outside. He focused on his work, dealing with drills and conducting business. Down in the streets, however, people were intrigued by an unusual sight, owls swooping past in broad daylight. Amazement and curiosity spread among the onlookers, most of whom had never witnessed such an extraordinary sight, especially in daylight. Oblivious to this spectacle, Mr. Dursleycottonbottom carried on with his normal, owl-free morning, engaging in his daily routine with a temper that escalated as the day progressed. During his lunchtime stroll to the bakery across the road, Mr. Dursleycottonbottom came across the group of cloaked individuals again. Their presence evoked an unsettling feeling in him, and he eyed them with anger as he passed by. Curiosity got the better of him, and he overheard fragments of their conversation, mentioning the Potterwotters and their son, Barry. A shiver of fear ran through him, prompting him to return to his office hastily. Once back in his office, he struggled to compose himself, dismissing the notion of any connection between the cloaked individuals and the Potterwotters as mere coincidence. He hesitated to call home and share his concerns with his wife, Mrs. Dursleycottonbottom, who became distressed at any mention of her sister. Though he hardly knew his sister-in-law's family, he couldn't shake off the unease he felt in the presence of those enigmatic individuals. As the afternoon wore on, Mr. Dursleycottonbottom found it increasingly challenging to concentrate on his work, his mind preoccupied with thoughts of the Potterwotters and the mysterious group. When he left the building at 5 o'clock, The worry still lingered, leading him to inadvertently collide with someone just outside the door. Unbeknownst to Mr. Dursleycottonbottom, his seemingly ordinary morning had set in motion a chain of events that would soon thrust him into a world of magic and mystery beyond his wildest imagination. "Sorry," he grunted, as the tiny old man stumbled and almost fell. Mr. Dursleycottonbottom's unease grew when he noticed the man's eerie violet cloak, an odd sight for such a bright day. Strangely, the old man showed no signs of distress. Instead, his face contorted into a wide, unsettling smile. In a squeaky voice that drew attention from passers-by, the man spoke with an unsettling cheerfulness. "Don't be sorry, my dear sir, for nothing could upset me today. Rejoice, for you know who has gone at last. Even muggles like yourself should be celebrating this happy, happy day." A chill ran down Mr. Dursleycottonbottom's spine as the stranger wrapped his arms around him, a gesture both jarring and unsettling. He had no idea what the term muggle meant, but he felt a sense of discomfort that lingered long after the old man had departed, leaving Mr. Dursleycottonbottom standing alone and bewildered. As he returned home, his unease grew when he spotted the same tabby cat from earlier, perched on the garden wall, seemingly watching him with an unsettling intensity. Mr. Dursleycottonbottom tried to shoo it away, but the cat's stern gaze unnerved him. Was this normal cat behavior? He wondered, his sense of reality wavering. Inside the house, Mr. Dursleycottonbottom tried to conceal his unease from his wife, Mrs. Dursleycottonbottom, pretending everything was normal. However, the unsettling encounter with the old man and the strange cat's watchful presence gnawed at his mind. He kept the peculiar events to himself, hoping they were mere figments of his imagination, though he had always despised the idea of imagination itself. Later that evening, the unsettling feeling intensified as the news reported unusual owl sightings across the nation. These nocturnal creatures were flying about in broad daylight, defying their natural patterns. An eerie atmosphere enveloped the airwaves, and the newscaster's grin only added to the sense of inexplicable mystery. Mr. Dursleycottonbottom's unease grew with each passing moment, wondering if the events of the day were more than just peculiar coincidences. Yet, he pushed aside his anxieties, suppressing any inkling of curiosity or imagination, hoping that these unsettling occurrences would vanish into the shadows of the night. "Well, Ted," chuckled the weatherman, his grin bordering on the eerie, "I don't know about that, but it seems it's not just owls acting peculiar today. Viewers from the farthest reaches of Kent to the distant corners of Yorkshire and Dundee have been calling in, claiming a downpour of shooting stars instead of the rain I promised yesterday. Celebrating bonfire night a week early, are we? But brace yourselves, folks, for tonight will be wet." Mr. Dursleycottonbottom remained frozen in his armchair, an odd mix of amusement and unease crossing his face. Shooting stars raining all over Britain, owls flapping about in broad daylight, mysterious cloaked figures lurking everywhere, and that eerie whisper about the Potterwotters. Just then, Mrs. Dursleycottonbottom sauntered into the living room, bearing 2 cups of tea. Mr. Dursleycottonbottom knew he couldn't keep silent any longer. He had to tell her. His nerves got the best of him, and he cleared his throat nervously. Petunia, dear, have you heard anything from your sister lately?" As expected, Mrs. Dursleycottonbottom's expression twisted into a mix of shock and irritation. They usually pretended she didn't have a sister, and this sudden inquiry was out of character. "No," she retorted sharply. "Why on earth are you asking?" Mr. Dursleycottonbottom muttered, his voice low and cautious. "Funny stuff on the news, you see. Owls, shooting stars, and there were some, funny-looking people wandering about town today." Mrs. Dursleycottonbottom's patience wore thin. "So, what's your point?" Mr. Dursleycottonbottom hesitated before finally blurting out, "Well, I just thought, maybe it had something to do with, you know, her crowd." The uneasy humor in his voice created an eerie undertone, as if he was half convinced he might be uttering a bizarre conspiracy theory. In that eerie moment, as the strange occurrences unfolded and the whisper of the Potterwotters lingered, a tension between the eerie and the comical enveloped the Dursleycottonbottom household, leaving them in an unsettling realm where the ordinary world met the extraordinary in an enigmatic dance of humor and unease. Mrs. Dursleycottonbottom's tea tasted bitter as she sipped it through tightly pressed lips. Mr. Dursleycottonbottom wrestled with the thought of mentioning the name Potterwotter, a name that seemed to carry a dark weight, but he couldn't bring himself to speak of it. Instead, he casually inquired, "Their son, he'd be about Fugley's age now, wouldn't he?" Stiffly, Mrs. Dursleycottonbottom responded, "I suppose so. His name is Howard, right?" Mr. Dursleycottonbottom tried to sound nonchalant. Mrs. Dursleycottonbottom corrected him icily, "Barry, nasty, common name. If you ask me." Dread washed over Mr. Dursleycottonbottom as he felt his heart sink horribly. He feigned agreement with his wife, though he knew that beneath the seemingly ordinary conversation lay a chilling undercurrent. Silently, they climbed the stairs to their bedroom, but Mr. Dursleycottonbottom's mind couldn't rest. He sneaked to the bedroom window, peering down into the front garden. There, the cat still lingered, its unwavering gaze fixed on Privet Drive as though waiting for something ominous. Questions swirled in his mind. Were the Potterwotters somehow involved in the strange occurrences? Fear gripped him at the mere thought of being connected to them, and he desperately hoped that nothing could draw them into this enigmatic world. Despite his attempts to reassure himself, Mr. Dursleycottonbottom was unaware of the sinister forces at play. The cat outside remained vigilant, impervious to the surrounding commotion. It didn't flinch when owls soared overhead or when car doors slammed on the next street. Almost midnight, the cat finally stirred. Suddenly, a man materialized on the very corner the cat had been fixated on, appearing out of thin air with an eerie silence that seemed unnatural. He was unlike anyone the Dursleycottonbottoms had seen on Privet Drive. Tall, thin, and extraordinarily old, with flowing silver hair and beard. He exuded an air of ancient wisdom. His long robes, a sweeping purple cloak, and high-heeled, buckled boots hinted at a mystique that went far beyond the ordinary. Albus Humble-Cumble-Bore, for that was his name, possessed piercing blue eyes that sparkled behind half-moon spectacles. His nose, crooked and seemingly broken, added to his enigmatic allure. The atmosphere around him grew eerie and mysterious as he stood, an enigmatic figure with a hidden purpose yet to be unveiled. And so, as Mr. Dursleycottonbottom slipped into what he hoped would be a peaceful slumber, unbeknownst to him, the very fabric of his reality was about to be torn apart by forces far beyond his comprehension. The chilling events that awaited him would prove that he was, indeed, very wrong. Albus Humble-Cumble-Bore stepped into the dimly lit street, a place where his very presence was met with hostility. Unaware or uncaring of the unwelcome atmosphere, he rummaged in his cloak, searching for something. But there was no escaping the feeling of being watched, and he glanced up to meet the unyielding gaze of the cat at the end of the street. A twisted smile crept across his face as he muttered, "I should have known." From within his cloak emerged a silver cigarette lighter, and with each click, the street lamps flickered and died, plunging the once illuminated road into darkness. 12 times he clicked the eerie device until the only light remaining was the eerie gleam in the cat's eyes. Now, nothing could be seen from the windows of the houses, not even the most vigilant onlooker like Mrs. Dursleycottonbottom. Humble-Cumble-Bore made his way toward number 4, settling down on the wall beside the cat. Without looking at it, he spoke as if he knew its true identity. "Fancy seeing you here, Professor McBattlestar Galactica." To his surprise, the cat transformed into a severe-looking woman with square glasses that mirrored the markings the cat had around its eyes. Professor McBattlestar Galactica, cloaked in emerald, seemed perturbed. She questioned how Humble-Cumble-Bore knew it was her, and he replied with a smile, "I've never seen a cat sit so stiffly." Their conversation alluded to an ominous occasion, a day of celebration shadowed by hidden dangers. People had noticed strange happenings, from flocks of owls to shooting stars, even among the muggles. Humble-Cumble-Bore's words hinted at an ominous past, a time of darkness, where nothing was worthy of celebration for 11 long years. Despite the apparent disappearance of you-know-who, Professor McBattlestar Galactica remained cautious, as if waiting for more answers from Humble-Cumble-Bore. She expressed concern about careless actions that could expose their world to the muggles, risking their very existence. Humble-Cumble-Bore's calm demeanor didn't falter. He seemed to carry a weight of experience and knowledge. He offered her a sweet called a lemon drop, but she rejected it, too preoccupied with the weight of uncertainty lingering in the air. In the midst of their chilling discussion, the specter of a lurking darkness loomed, and the dark street seemed to whisper its secrets to those who could comprehend its eerie language. The two figures, Humble-Cumble-Bore and Professor McBattlestar Galactica, faced a world both relieved and haunted, where the echoes of a vanished evil whispered with a menacing chill. The uneasy silence told them that even if you know who was seemingly gone, the shadow of his malevolence lingered in the dark crevices of their thoughts. "My dear Professor," whispered Humble-Cumble-Bore, his voice now low and chilling, "surely a person of your intellect can utter his true name. All this feeble you-know-who charade, for 11 long, haunting years, I've been endeavoring to persuade people to address him by his rightful name, Voldemort." Professor McBattlestar Galactica flinched, but Humble-Cumble-Bore, occupied with extracting 2 lemon drops, appeared oblivious to her discomfort. "It all becomes so perplexing if we continue using that pitiful you-know-who. I have never found reason to cower in fear at the utterance of Voldemort's name." "I know you haven't," muttered Professor McBattlestar Galactica, her tone a mix of exasperation and awe. "But you're different. Everyone knows you're the only one, you-know-oh, fine, Voldemort ever feared." "You flatter me," replied Humble-Cumble-Bore coolly. "Voldemort possessed powers beyond my grasp, only because you're too noble to employ them. Thank the darkness for concealing my blush. I haven't blushed so since Madame Pomfrey complimented my new earmuffs." Professor McBattlestar Galactica shot a sharp look at Humble-Cumble-Bore and said, "The owls are but a mere whisper compared to the rumors circulating. Do you know what everyone's saying? About why he vanished? About what brought his reign of terror to a halt? It was evident that Professor McBattlestar Galactica had reached the crux of her anxious waiting, be it as a feline or a woman. Her piercing stare sought the truth, unyielding until Humble Cumblebore confirmed it. However, Humble Cumblebore, now savoring another lemon drop, remained reticent. They say, she continued insistently, that last night Voldemort descended upon Godric's Hollow. He sought the Potterwotters. The rumor whispers that Lily and James Potterwotter are dead. Humble Cumblebore's head lowered, and Professor McBattlestar Galactica gasped. Lily and James, I can't fathom it. I refuse to believe it. Oh, Albus. Humble Cumblebore gently patted her shoulder. I know, he said, burdened with sorrow. Professor McBattlestar Galactica's voice quivered as she continued. But that's not all. They say he tried to murder the Potterwotter's son, Barry, but, impossibly, he failed. He couldn't extinguish that little boy's life. No one knows why or how, but they claim that when he couldn't kill Barry Potterwotter, Voldemort's power shattered, and that's why he's gone. Humble Cumblebore nodded solemnly. Is it true? Stammered Professor McBattlestar Galactica. After all the atrocities he committed, all the lives he took, he couldn't vanquish a mere child. It's incredulous, of all things to halt him. But how in the name of darkness did Barry survive? We can but speculate, responded Humble Cumblebore. Perhaps we'll never truly know. Professor McBattlestar Galactica drew out a delicate lace handkerchief and dabbed at her eyes beneath her spectacles. Humble Cumblebore sniffed, extracting a peculiar golden watch from his pocket. It bore 12 hands, but no numerals. Instead, tiny planets orbited its edge. Though it seemed arcane to others, it made sense to Humble Cumblebore, who stowed it away and said, Hagridlewittle's late. I assume he informed you of my presence here. Yes, answered Professor McBattlestar Galactica, and I suppose you won't divulge the reason behind your presence at this forsaken location. I've come to deliver Barry to his aunt and uncle. They are his only kin now. You can't possibly mean those wretched people who dwell here. Professor McBattlestar Galactica cried, leaping to her feet and pointing at number 4. Humble Cumblebore, this can't be. I've been surveilling them all day. You couldn't find a pair less akin to us. And that boy they have. I witnessed him tormenting his own mother as they walked up the street, bellowing for sweets. Barry Potterwotter, to come and reside here. It's the safest place for him. Humble Cumblebore declared with unwavering resolve. His aunt and uncle will have the chance to explain everything when he's older. I've penned them a letter. A letter. Professor McBattlestar Galactica echoed weakly, sitting back down on the wall. Humble Cumblebore, do you truly believe you can clarify all this in a mere letter? These people will never comprehend him. He'll be famous, a legend. I wouldn't be astonished if this day is remembered as Barry Potterwotter Day in the future. There will be books written about him, and every child in our world will know his name. Exactly, said Humble Cumblebore, gazing sternly over the brim of his half-moon spectacles. It's enough to confound any young boy, famous before he can even toddle or utter a word, renowned for something he won't even remember. Can you not see how much better off he'll be growing up away from all that until he's prepared to face it? Professor McBattlestar Galactica started to speak, then hesitated, swallowed, and finally said, Yes, you're right, of course. But how is the boy to arrive here, Humble Cumblebore? She eyed his cloak with suspicion, as if she suspected Barry to be hidden underneath. Hagridlewitle will bring him. You trust Hagridlewitle with something this momentous? I would entrust Hagridlewitle with my very life, said Humble Cumblebore, not to cast doubt on his intentions. Grumbled Professor McBattlestar Galactica, but you can't deny his tendency to be careless. What was that? A low rumble echoed through the silence, growing louder as they searched for its source. It swelled into a deafening roar as they looked up to the sky, a colossal motorcycle hurtling through the air and landing on the road before them. If the motorcycle was massive, it was nothing compared to the giant perched upon it. He stood almost twice the height of an average man and was at least 5 times broader. His appearance defied human standards. Bushy black hair and beard obscured most of his face, and his colossal hands resembled trash can lids. Even his leather boots seemed like those of a mythical creature. In his immense arms, he cradled a bundle of blankets. Hagridlewitle, Humble Cumblebore said, relieved. At last. And where did you procure that motorcycle? Borrowed it. Professor Humble Cumblebore, sir, said the giant, carefully dismounting from the motorcycle. Young Sirius Black lent it to me. I've got him, sir. No difficulties, I trust. None at all, sir. The house was nearly destroyed, but I got him out before the Muggles descended. He fell asleep as we flew over Bristol. Humble Cumblebore and Professor McBattlestar Galactica leaned forward, inspecting the bundle of blankets. Inside slumbered a baby boy, under a tuft of jet black hair upon his forehead. They observed a peculiarly shaped scar, a lightning bolt. Is that where? Professor McBattlestar Galactica whispered. Yes, confirmed Humble Cumblebore. He'll bear that mark forever. Can't you do something about it, Humble Cumblebore? Even if I could, I wouldn't. Scars can be useful. I bear one above my left knee that precisely maps the London Underground. Now then, Hagrid-a-Whittle, hand him here. We should proceed. Humble Cumblebore cradled Barry in his arms and turned toward the Dursleycottonbottoms' house. May I bid him farewell, sir? Hagrid-a-Whittle inquired, bending down. His massive, shaggy head hovered over Barry, and he bestowed upon the child a scratchy, whiskery kiss. But then, without warning, Hagrid-a-Whittle let out a howl akin to that of a wounded beast. "SOCH," Professor McBattlestar Galactica hissed, her eyes darting around nervously. "You'll wake the muggles." Sorry," sobbed Hagrid-a-Whittle, pulling out a large, spotted handkerchief and covering his face with it. "But I can't bear it. Lily and James dead, and poor little Barry forced to her life with muggles. Yes, it's all dreadfully tragic, but control yourself, Hagrid-a-Whittle, or we'll be discovered," Professor McBattlestar Galactica whispered, gently patting Hagrid-a-Whittle on the arm. Meanwhile, Humble Cumblebore stepped over the low garden wall and approached the front door. He gently placed Barry on the doorstep, retrieved a letter from his cloak, and tucked it inside Barry's blankets. Then he rejoined the other two. For a moment, the trio stood in silence, gazing at the tiny bundle. Hagrid-a-Whittle's shoulders quivered with emotion. Professor McBattlestar Galactica blinked back tears, and the usual twinkle in Humble Cumblebore's eyes seemed to have dimmed. Well, Humble Cumblebore finally spoke. "That's done. We should leave this place. The celebrations await us." "Yeah," Hagrid-a-Whittle replied, his voice muffled from crying. "I'll be tacking Sirius Spurious his bike back." "G-Night, Professor McBattlestar Galactica, Professor Humble Cumblebore, sir." Wiping his streaming eyes on his jacket sleeve, Hagrid-a-Whittle mounted the motorcycle and started the engine with a thunderous roar. The bike ascended into the night sky and disappeared from view. "I expect I'll see you soon, Professor McBattlestar Galactica," Humble Cumblebore said with a nod. Professor McBattlestar Galactica responded by blowing her nose. Humble Cumblebore turned and walked back down the street. At the corner, he retrieved the silver put-outer and clicked it once. 12 balls of light shot back to their respective street lamps, bathing Privet Drive in an eerie orange glow. In the distance, a tabby cat slinked around the corner. Just visible on the doorstep of number 4 was the bundle of blankets. "Good luck, Barry," Humble Cumblebore murmured, his voice barely audible. With a swish of his cloak, he vanished from sight. A gentle breeze rustled the neatly trimmed hedges of Privet Drive, a place that seemed too mundane and orderly for anything extraordinary to occur. Unbeknownst to Barry Potterwotter, he rolled over in his blankets, oblivious to his own significance and the fame that awaited him. Little did he know that within a few hours, he would be startled awake by Mrs. Dursleycottonbottom's scream as she opened the front door to retrieve the milk bottles. Nor did he know that the next few weeks would be filled with the prodding and pinching of his cousin Fugley. He couldn't possibly fathom that, at this very moment, people across the country were raising their glasses in secret, whispering to Barry Potterwotter, the boy who lived.